Traits of successful people, I think, are discipline, intelligence, integrity, values, an ability to not care what other people think, ability to be wrong, because you can be wrong, ability to take risk, but calculated risks. Like, I don't necessarily think I'm a big risk taker. People typically think that of entrepreneurs, but like my risks were probably more calculated than somebody if they went to go get a job. Like, I think that's more riskier, unless the person knows exactly what they're doing, than what I did. For example, starting a company, like I knew what the risks were. I knew what the potential setbacks could be. So at that point, is it risky? I don't think so. But I think those are the values.
What about the traits of a successful leader?
Well, it's an interesting thing, right? A successful leader, what are the traits of a successful leader? Well, here's what I can tell you it's not. It's not this artsy-fartsy, sing kumbaya BS that you hear from, and I won't name names, but there's a lot of these so-called leadership gurus on the internet that have never run a company. They've never run a company. The biggest company they've run is maybe, 2 or 3 people as a consulting firm out of their kitchen. So if you ask people that have led hundreds or thousands of people, which I've done, and I lead hundreds of people and growing, we'll be at 1,000 people here soon. I can tell you that leadership is based off values of making sure that you have the ability to listen to what other people are saying, and you have the ability to digest it and be willing to change and adapt accordingly, right? And you have to be willing to hold a position. Like, sometimes and at some points you have to rule with an iron fist. When you know as the entrepreneur and when you know as the CEO that what you're doing and the decisions you're making are correct. Because most constructive ideas are individual, they're not group, right? The group doesn't have as many single individually creative ideas. It's always from one person. Look at what Elon Musk did. Was that a group or an individual? It was an individual, right? Look at all the different people throughout history. There were individuals that created big movements, whether it was Buddha, whether it was Jesus Christ, whether it was Alexander the Great, whether it was all these people. They created these movements in history. So they created these movements in history, right? So it was all individually based. So, this idea that you're gonna get some camaraderie going with a company and you should be there to just listen and understand and all this stuff is, yeah, it's great. But at the end of the day, you gotta make the decision. So any leader will tell you that, like, yeah, you gotta listen, you gotta be compassionate, you gotta be understanding, but you have to be able to hold a position. And sometimes you have to rule with an iron fist. You have to say, hey, this is the way it is. You don't like it? Sorry. It's not a survey. You're not running a company. I tell people all the time, like, this isn't a democracy. Companies are not democracies. You don't get to vote, right? It's not government, right? There's an individual that went out and took a substantially huge amount of risk and had a lot on the line, and that person is ultimately responsible, not the people, right? So it's not a democracy, it's a dictatorship. And people will fluff that up, and like these online gurus about leadership will fluff that up and like it's like a democracy. No, dude, you're saying that because you've never run a fucking business. You've never run a company larger than 10 people. So you have to understand that, yeah, you have to be empathetic and you have to understand, but you also have to rule. And if you don't rule, your whole thing falls apart.